Greetings, everyone. My name is Irina Manikovska, and this is Make Your Innovation Works. And today with me is Dr. Sass Brown, and we're going to talk a little bit, I hope not so, a little bit, about innovations in sustainable fashion. Fashion industry is one of the most challenging industry in terms of sustainability, but still a lot of interesting things happen there. New kind of raw materials, supply chain optimization, and different kind of approach which helps us to shape our mindset in terms of how we consume and shape our business. And I'm very pleased to have Dr. Sass today with me because she's one of the maybe best experts in this area, and she combines perfectly her expertise and passion for artisan and different kind of like crafts and stuff. So I pass my word to Sass. Sass, can you please tell a little bit more about your sustainable fashion background, your passion, why you're doing this, and how you inspire other people?
Oh, for sure. Thank you for the invitation. First of all, I'm very happy to be here. My fashion journey has been a fairly long one. I'm a fashion designer by trade, so I trained as a fashion designer, worked as a fashion designer for both small and large brands, mostly in North America, Canada, and the US. However, I got into sustainability probably around 20 years ago, which is kind of earlier about when sustainability hit the awareness of people in the fashion industry. So I was one of the early people that started talking and publishing and writing and about sustainable fashion. So I have a couple of books on the topic. First came out way back in 2010, and the other one in 2013, focusing on all of the challenges that we have, impacts within the mainstream fashion system and alternatives to them. So inspirational design responses. And when I say I design, I don't necessarily mean product design. I mean systems change and systems design, process design, supply chain change, etc. So publishing, talking on my website, on my in my books, etc., about that topic, and that sort of just became my whole world from there on. So what I've done and who I've collaborated with is probably too many to mention, but I'm currently at Kingston University in London, having previously been the founding dean at Dubai Institute of Design Innovation in Dubai, and before that, dean at Fashion Institute of Technology in New York. Now I'm at Kingston University, and I'm director of a program that I wrote myself on sustainable fashion, so a one-year master's program at Kingston University, London.
So, quick question here. What inspired you to start to work on this subject in those times when no one, like, I mean, in early 2000, no one was talking about that we need to drive sustainability. We were like still overconsuming everything. So, what drive you today, in those days?
There was a beginning of a conversation, but the conversation was very general across all design disciplines and fields. It was about the challenges that we have with raw material resources, with energy footprints. So the very first sort of books were coming out on design innovation with sustainability in mind, but they were really broad. They might show an energy saving kitchen device next to an upcycled table, next to organic cotton t-shirt, and nobody was talking about fashion. And I'm a designer, so I wasn't interested in boring beige organic t-shirts with political slogans printed all over them. They have their place, and I'm not devaluing them, but it's not fashion, and I'm a fashion designer, so I was interested in what people were doing that was aesthetically pleasing as well as ethically produced. And so that's really where it came from, because having traveled a lot, being in both design and academia, I've had the luck and the pleasure of traveling a great deal and teaching in a lot of universities around the world, whether as a visiting speaker or part of a conference, etc., or writing them a small workshop and teaching that, whatever. And so meant that I got to know the design communities in many, many different diverse countries around the world. So I knew there was great stuff happening, and it was all happening within little localized bubbles. So there was great stuff happening in Valparaiso in Chile, and in Nottingham and Trent, and in Brooklyn, New York, and
Mhm.
Berlin and Germany. But they weren't connected at this stage. It was sort of the nascent stage of slow fashion and design innovation as it pertains to sustainability, people challenging the mainstream system of fashion. So I thought it was really important to connect those dots, to start introducing and sharing what really great work was happening around the world by designers and brands, and introducing them to each other and promoting them and sharing them. So the first book was about that. The website came out at the same time. It's long since archived now. But that was the point of it, to show what really great work was happening that people just seemed unaware of at the time. It hadn't reached any kind of social consciousness. So that was really the intent behind it, or the motivation initially.
And what helps you to promote these ideas of sustainability fashion now among the students? So, what is like core component of your program? I know you work a lot with different kind of students from across the globe for a lot of years. So, what's core component? What's your secret sauce?
I don't know if I have a secret sauce. I guess my global connections are a big part of it, because I have worked and taught and connected and written about people and brands and designers and artisans all over the world. So I have a very, very broad geographical base of contacts and connections and at the core of sustainable fashion is a very supportive community, because we all want to move the needle forward. We all want to make our industry more sustainable. So many people within that space are very sharing and want to communicate what they're doing, learn from what other people are doing. And so it's probably what I bring to the program that I wrote and teach now more than anything, because we have speakers from all over the world, mostly online. But yeah, because of that access to a very broad base, and because I was always writing about sustainability, everything from systems change to supply chain to design to material sourcing, it's also a very broad base of connections and contacts. So that's helped enormously to expose students. And the students that come to my program, they're MA level, so I teach MA and PhD students. So they already know they have an interest in sustainability. It's not undergraduate's a bit different. Students do an undergraduate degree sometimes to get the flavor of a new country, to get the experience somewhere else, sometimes to please the parents, sometimes because they're not quite sure what they want to do yet. But by the time they get to masters and PhD, they're a lot more focused and determined. And many of my students come from an undergraduate in fashion design. Not all of them by any stretch. Some of them come from craft or fine art or filmmaking or business, marketing, any number of different degrees. But the majority of them come from fashion design, because they're simply not learning enough about sustainability in their undergraduate degrees. So they know it's an add-on to their existing knowledge.
Amazing. And what have changed in the last, like you are in this industry for more than 20 years. So have is humanity understanding of sustainability issues in fashion evolved somehow, or complexity grew, or what?
Yes, it has. A lot's changed and a lot's evolved. Obviously, most people, irrelevant whether they're in the fashion industry or not, have an awareness of the impact of fashion and materials on people and planet. So the overall awareness has grown enormously. The growth of brands that are challenging mainstream systems and trying to do things differently from a multitude of different perspectives has obviously grown exponentially. Nevertheless, simultaneously to that, fast fashion and consumption continues to grow. and all of the labor and environmental impacts that are associated with cheap, quick production of garments, relevant whether it's fashionable or not. So we have a greater awareness. Part of the challenge with that is the attention span that people have. We're all inundated by so much information all of the time. And so what has happened in the sustainable fashion field is a lot of the information has been distilled down to very simplistic binary figures that are not truly accurate. They can't be when you oversimplify something such as, it takes, 1,712 liters of water to produce a single t-shirt. It's relatively a meaningless statistic. What kind of t-shirt? Made from what? Is it printed? Is it dyed? Where was it produced? Who produced it? Where is it being?
And which kind of water was used?
Yeah, is that including the consumption use of a garment, or just the production of it? So it's a good way of getting impacts across to people and the scale of impacts, but it sort of dumbs down the complexity of what is an extremely complicated and complex supply chain and problem. Every single component of the production of a garment, right from the conceptualization, the ideation, the inspiration, can and usually is problematic all the way to the discarding of the garment at the end of its life, and every single stage in between. So, this sort of very binary statistics are first inaccurate. Statistics, the whole point of statistics is that they should be based on science-based, provable data analysis, which much of it isn't, and that it is specific, and those sort of figures are neither of those things. So it does sort of bring it to the attention of the public and make them realize that this is a problematic industry, but it doesn't go very much further than that. So a lot of people come into this thinking, wanting to know what's good or bad. And there's almost nothing that's good or bad. There's a whole range of shades of gray in between that. But, you can't answer a question such as, well, is cotton better than recycled polyester? Well, that depends. Where was it grown? How was it grown? Is it fair trade? Is it organic? Is it transitional? Was it rain-fed? Was it intensely irrigated? Was the recycled polyester made from virgin plastic bottles that were never actually used? Or, or were they transported long distances as recycled goods? There are so many complexities and layers to that question that there are no simple goods or bads, yes or no. And it's impossible to address everything at once. So there is no perfect, sustainable answer at this stage. You can't produce locally, focus on degrowth, not compete commercially in a capitalistic system, use only organic or natural or recyclable materials, document transparently the entirety of your supply and actual value chain, and have some form of end of life considerations simultaneously. To boil that down to a simplistic comparison of two equally good things, but one thing is not better than another. Producing and sourcing a garment locally, let's say here in London where I am, as opposed to supporting, say, an indigenous community of hand weavers in Guatemala. Clearly these two things can't work together. One,
they're incomparable.
Yeah, but they're both equally good. So you can't say, well, is it better to work with artisans in the global south than source and produce locally? Well, that depends upon your personal values and where you want to focus in terms of having an impact on the industry, because it can't be produced and sourced locally and support artisans in Guatemala, right? So you have to make your choices. Like anything, you have to focus on what you can do and do well. And then sustainability is a journey. You hope to continue to expand and grow and have a greater impact. impact, not necessarily in terms of scale, but in terms of in other ways, reach, or any number of other measures. But yeah, you have to start somewhere and you have to do it well, because you can't do everything. It's just not possible. So there is no wholly 100% sustainable brand, piece of clothing, anything at the moment. We're on a journey to get there, and we've still got a long way to go.
So basically, the answer is that any kind of business is responsible of making like some kind of like audit of their supply chain, find more sustainable suppliers or way of supply. I mean, depend on what they do, and create some kind of strategy, because you can't fix all those issues during 1 year. It's impossible. So
Absolutely.
it takes years. So you need to have a strategy, and which kind of stuff impacts your business most and your customers, because you can do very sustainable business, but if it's not competitive, you're going to be dead at the end of the day.
Sure. I mean, as I said, I think that you have to make choices. So one of the first things I have my students to do, for example, is to develop a personal value system, or to document it. Most people have an intuitive one. They know that water is an issue to them, or climate change, or recycling, or waste, or whatever. So intuitively, many of us know where our issues are. But there's a difference between actually mining that information, documenting it, and ranking it. So I have my students do a values map. Where do their values lie? In what order? And out of that comes a personal manifesto that is intended to guide their future practice, whatever that practice is. Manifesto is a live document. It's not written and stored like a business plan in a file folder, and you don't look at it till the end of your fiscal year, or maybe you never look at it again. It's intended to be a document that continuously guides your choices. And that's something that I often bring up, no matter what I'm doing, whether I'm talking to the industry, whether I'm talking to students, whether it's in my program or other programs, because I think that's really important. I do think that the responsibility is individual. But of course, brands and companies are made up of individuals. And we've traditionally, particularly in the West, had this separation of it's sort of all fair in business, because business is, the priority is profit, it's growth. But we have a real challenge when it comes to sustainability, not just within fashion, but within any industry, because there is no such thing as infinite growth on a finite planet with finite resources. So there is an intrinsic challenge within a capitalistic free market system with sustainability. As I said, not sustainability of fashion particularly, but sustainability full stop. So there is a challenge there, and that means reevaluating what success means to a certain degree. If you're a publicly traded company, of course, your first responsibility is to your shareholders and quarterly returns. So clearly within that, that's not a sustainable business model. It can't be, because it requires quarterly growth to be able to give back to the people that invested in the business to begin with. So it means digging an awful lot deeper than just, substituting materials or producing something locally, but it means looking at your business structure and defining what success means to you. So, and success, we tend to think of it in fiscal terms, but there are many ways of defining success. A work-life balance, creative freedom, support of things and people that we care about. So there are a lot of ways of defining it, and that tends to be something that we don't think about. We get in a system that's predetermined, that this is how you achieve success. This is the route to get there. And success is defined by proliferation, by growth, and by fiscal returns. Well, that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. What's wrong with building something and sustaining it instead of proliferating it? So, evaluating what success means to you. We've seen over the years, we've seen so many fashion designers burn out because of that system that always puts them in this cycle of, well, it must grow. We have to have another diffusion line. We need to have more seasons. We need to have more styles. We need to, sell to more countries and have more accounts. And, the burnout rate of designers is ridiculous because of that pressure to continually grow and expand.
But so basically, it happens that sustainability responsibility starts on individual level, and it's totally different to what this classic management books teach us. When you have a boss, and this boss has initiative, or a board, or whomever, I mean someone who leads the company, and they put this initiative into work by cascading it to senior, middle, and liner management. But here we're talking about that, okay, regardless what is your impact, and which kind of are your relations, so you need to start individually think which kind of relations you want to build with sustainability, what are your values, what you're standing for. In this case, you start to initiate different kind of projects, initiatives. You can improve small process, but it can have a huge impact if you're working in a Marks and Spencer retail size or somewhere. So it starts from the bottom level and you start to push it on top, and vice versa. From the top, you can have different kind of support and involvement, but it's not someone's responsibility when, okay, there are the smartest guys, they know what they're doing, and I delegate them this decision making. So it's your decision making because you're part of this planet.
Yeah, I think it is an individual responsibility, irrelevant whether you're working in a small business or a huge corporation. The challenge with huge corporations is that sustainability often becomes a department. So I've advised some very large global brands, and usually from a design perspective. And the problems there are that they will say, okay, this is great. We'd love, we can tell our sourcing and production department that we want them to use these, fair trade or these particular factories or support these artisans. But they're a different department. We have no impact on that department, and we can make whatever recommendations we want. But ultimately, they're driven by different criteria, and their criteria is faster, cheaper. Yeah. So as long as initiatives are departmentalized, they're siloed, and that reduces an overall impact. So that is problematic.
So maybe you have some kind of examples of ideas, because it's very important. Sometimes we may have sustainability initiatives, but if we're talking about our KPIs and expectations from our stakeholders and shareholders, they expect revenue growth, obviously, and profit. And in this case, they confront each other. I mean, I have KPI to provide the growth, but on the other hand, I need to do it in a sustainable way. And it sounds like impossible task to do. So is there any kind of way or approach how you can align the sustainability KPIs and business KPIs themselves? So any kind of guidance for businesses who are struggling with this?
I mean, there are certainly businesses that continuously walk that line of profit and growth versus sustainability initiatives. Probably one of the most successful is, of course, Patagonia. They are a business. They do make a profit. Yeah. But their values, they're a mission-driven for profit. So, yes, they operate on the understanding that the more profit they make, the more they can support their sustainable initiatives. So there are ways of walking those lines and defining those compromises. And then there's also just opting out of that value system and saying, well, you know what? I'm not going to produce more stuff or use more virgin materials or whatever it is that you choose to focus on, going back to those values again, and work differently. I mean, there are also different business models that are not hierarchical, that are flat, that value the farmer that grew the cotton as much as the designer that designs the product, or the customer that purchases it, because ultimately they are all required for a successful business or a brand. So there are businesses that have a much, much flatter hierarchy or organizational chart that doesn't say, well, I'm the boss, it's my business, I tell you what to do, irrelevant of, how you feel about it or etc. So there are very different business models with a for-profit, not-for-profit, or collaborations of both. Many social businesses in fashion operate both a for-profit and a not-for-profit, and the for-profit to a degree is what funds the not-for-profit. So that's one way of working. There are just not-for-profits as well, of course, and who have a social mission or an environmental mission, and then for-profits that also are socially driven. So there are lots of ways of doing this, depending upon what your overall intent is, what your visions are, and where your values lie.
So basically, you can scale sustainable solution by redesigning your business model and start to embed different kind of like sustainability in a very broad context in what kind of business you're doing, like this Patagonia example. So they use profit to increase support. Other business can do it differently, and there are circular economy examples. So you just start to think, okay, what I can do here and how can I make my business model stronger? Because at the end of the day, if we're making our business model more sustainable in terms of sustainability, it helps us to create a more extend our life cycle of the business itself. Because if business grows very fast, sometimes it dies very fast as well, because it
Absolutely.
wasn't like designed properly as a system.
We know that sustainability as is a bankable thing. We know that businesses that focus on sustainability within the fashion industry actually have an advantage over those that don't. So absolutely, but again, where you choose your values can vary enormously. And it's important to know what your values are and how you can apply them to your business. But beyond sort of individual and brand responsibility, there's also government responsibility. Nothing is going to change in our industry unless we have those three stakeholders aligned: consumers, companies, brands, whatever you want to call them, and government. Because brands will always say, well, we only produce what consumers want.
Yeah.
And consumers will say, well, there aren't enough sustainable brands out there, so we buy, or enough fashionable sustainable brands or whatever. So we buy what's available, or cheap enough sustainable brands. And none of them will comply without government regulation, and not just regulation, but the teeth to actually impose it. So, for example, here in the UK, we have an anti-slavery requirement for all brands. They must make a statement on their website that they are aware that there is slavery in the fashion supply chain, that they're trying to address it, and that hopefully they don't have any. There's no checks and balances to prove that that's anything but a meaningless statement on their website. There's no governmental threat or checks to actually impose that. So the legislation in itself is meaningless without the manpower and the investment to ensure that it is complied with. So, but it does take all three stakeholders for sure, because otherwise you've got a broken loop and everyone will blame the component.
Yeah.
So,
and like a couple of quick recommendations. So for any kind of fashion business who wants to start to do their business in a more sustainable way, are there any kind of like action items what they should do, like evaluate or analyze their supply chain and whatever? So like, basic checklists where to start, because
depends.
the problem is huge.
It is huge, and it depends upon the scale of the business. If it's a large company, they absolutely have to look at their supply chain. They have to look at transparency, and they have to look at accountability. One of the biggest challenges with big brands is that their supply chain is so dispersed globally. And that's because production at scale is a very specialized undertaking, whether it's the growing of fiber or the extraction of oil that makes synthetic fibers, whether it is weaving, spinning, garment production, dyeing, printing, whatever, all of those different processes that textiles and garments go through are highly specialized at scale. And so a single garment can circumvent the globe just through the production cycle. You know, from where the cotton was grown, let's just use cotton because it's an easy example that everyone can relate to. Let's say it's cotton grown in Bangladesh. It's sent to China for spinning because Bangladesh aren't a specialist in spinning and dyeing fiber. So it's sent somewhere else. So it's sent off to China for spinning. Maybe it's a Japanese, let's say it's a pair of denim jeans. Let's say it's a Japanese self-edge denim. So it's sent off to Japan for weaving. It might be produced somewhere like Turkey. Turkey's a denim specialist in production. It might then be warehoused and sold to a North American consumer. So, and that's only one component. We're only talking about the denim there. Denim jeans are a relatively simplistic garment in as much as there's no linings and interfacings that a tailored jacket would have, for example. But there is still a zipper, buttons, thread, 2 types of labels, probably 3 types of labels, pocket linings, studs, you know, all of these different components, each of which has their own very complex supply chain. So the carbon footprint alone on that production is enormous. So for a big brand looking at accountability and transparency of their supply chain is absolutely paramount. Most brands at this stage do have sustainability departments, do have compliance departments, do have internal reporting and accounting. Very, very few of them publish those outcomes. You know, I mean,
nothing to be proud of.
Generally not. No, I mean, you know, if we take a local example here in the UK, in the north of England, or we have a lot of very fast fashion brands, Pretty Little Things, Boohoo, etc., are all based in Manchester, Leicester, that area. And of course, there was a big report just 3 years ago, a governmental report that looked into production for those brands in Leicester, because it's a large manufacturing hub here in the centre of the UK. And it found that they weren't in compliance, even minimum wage compliance. So never mind other sustainability or health and safety requirements, overtime minimization or proper payment for, etc. They weren't in compliance with any of that. They were very well aware of that. They had an internal evaluation. They knew that was the case. It was only when it came out publicly and the government did looked into this and published their report that was like, oh, yes, we're changing that now. But they were already aware. Most brands are very well aware of what they're doing wrong. It's just, it's not transparent. And that's a long-standing problem in fashion where we think that our sources are precious and they're private. We don't want to share the factories we use or where we get our textiles and fabrics because we don't want our competitors to use them. But that's not, it's not a strategy that works if you're trying to embed sustainability into your business. And it has to be accountable and transparent. Way too many brands over the years have used the excuse that they don't really know the totality of their supply chain. If you think of the scale of production that someone like a Boohoo or a Fashion Nova or a Shein or a Temu does in terms of production, we're talking about thousands of new styles every single day go up on their website to keep consumers interested. Now, many of those are just small sample production runs to see if consumers bite at it and want it, and then they go into bigger production when they see that it's something that's selling. But that the human and environmental footprint that is associated with developing and offering thousands of new styles every single day to consumers is incredibly huge. So, and nobody really knows very much about where they produce, how they produce. There's all kinds of, reports by not-for-profits like Live Behind the Label or Clean Clothes Campaign about atrocious garment production problems, minimum wage versus living wage, lack of health and safety considerations, enforced overtime. There's a litany of challenges within the production of textiles and garments in the mass-produced industry. And it's because the system of fashion, particularly fast fashion, that requires this constant, very fast overturn of new styles, new trends, new fashions, new options for consumers at rock bottom price, can only be produced by taking advantage of people and planet. That system is based on that.
I think social media make a huge contribution into this, because with all this TikTok, Instagram, you need to create favorable content. And it's this type of content when you bought something and you unpack and try it, and you can throw it away or give it away or return it back, and it makes zero sense. I mean, it's zero value behind 0 cents, but a huge impact on the planet and people and everything, but like literally 0 cents and value.
Sure. That said, I mean, social media has also had a good impact. It's also communicated to many people the impacts of their choices. There are many very popular bloggers, vloggers, whatever, on TikTok and other platforms that talk about sustainability and the impact of their choices. It's also been the impetus behind a lot of the rental, peer-to-peer sharing, shared wardrobes, garment exchanges, all of the plethora of apps that developed in the last few years, from Depop to Vestair to whatever. There's a myriad of them. They all popped up mostly because of people who did have a really engaged social profile, who wanted to be seen wearing different new things every year, but did not want the associated environmental problem or even the financial challenge of doing that. So a lot of those sharing and rental and resale apps were developed by social media proponents who wanted access to lots of new clothes, didn't need to own them because they only wanted to wear them for a quick TikTok video, and also didn't want to throw them away or whatever else. So there's lots of good can come out of things like that.
Yeah,
as
and
well.
here we're like jumping into our latest question of our discussion related to mindset. So we at the very beginning we talked about that actually sustainability starts from personal responsibility for making action contribution, and you understand that you create an impact with your own hands and what actions. So, and with social media, it's pretty similar example. You can use them differently. You can use them to help people to join and stand for some cause, share their experience, inspire others, which is obviously very good. And on the other hand, you can use this to make people anxious and like craving for more new, nice, like thousands of different new styles every day. So in terms of like mindset, obviously something needs to be changed here, but
That's the
maybe I don't
challenge.
know. Yeah, that's a challenge. I mean, I even can't ask the proper question, because there is no sense asking question. Okay, how we can change mindset?
Yeah,
It's a tricky one. Yeah,
we're talking about a culture shift. I mean, if I think of, say, my mother's generation, she would spend 3 months' wages to buy a coat because that's what it cost to get a decent coat. And it
yeah,
had to last her 10, 12, 15 years. That was just the norm.
yeah.
So we've gone from that to where we are today. In the last 20 years alone, I think there's been a 400% growth in consumption. The average British citizen, woman predominantly, has 20 pounds of clothing in their wardrobe they will never wear before they discard it. The average wear to use ratio is that a garment is worn 3 or 4 times before it's discarded. Of course, there's your favorite things in there, whether it's your jeans or whatever the heck it is that you wear over and over again. Then there's all those pieces that you buy on a whim that didn't cost you much more than a cappuccino, so they get discarded with about as much thought, or are never even worn before they're discarded. I mean, the challenges that we have here in changing the mindset that fashion is disposable is huge. And that is a problem. We're talking similarly in business, the concept of degrowth rather than growth is equally challenging. How do you convince a brand, a company, a corporation who's based on profit as the ultimate goal of what they do to understand the value and the need to focus on degrowth and limiting what they're doing and pulling back on what they're doing? I mean, ultimately, the truth is sustainability does not fit within a capitalistic mindset. It just doesn't. So there is a problem.
Yeah, but we can balance it if we're talking about personal responsibility. On this level, you're responsible for your actions. So, and
Absolutely.
you can contribute to the overall like greater good. And I think somewhere in between new solutions make you just need to push on them.
There are many solutions, there are many shades of grey, and there is no perfect nirvana at the moment. We're all just trying and doing what we can. So absolutely, it's not, degrowth and no profit, or exponential growth at the cost of people and planet. There are many, many things in between that all move the needle towards where we need to go. So absolutely, there are many options.
It sounds like a very, fertilized soil for new ideas because on the one
Yeah.
hand, we have a lot of limitations.
Mhm.
On the other hand, we need a lot of creative solutions to overcome the challenges within those limitations.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing with a problem, no matter how naughty or problematic it is it's an opportunity, right? Every challenge is an opportunity to look at something differently, to try do something differently, and to have a benefit instead of an impact. So the fashion industry is full of opportunity at the moment to make change in every space within our value chain. So yes, there are many opportunities, some of which
Just pick and
technology.
choose.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're back to where your values lie, right? Which part of this huge problem do you want to affect and impact, and where can you have an impact? So that may be technologically driven. It may be the absolute reverse. It may be learning from historic methods of how we have done things, and doing something slower, or more qualitative rather than quantitative. So there are many, many ways to come at it, but there's lots of opportunity for change, yes.
Sounds like a very optimistic ending of our podcast, and I'm very pleased that you were able to find time and join me, because I do believe that with limitations and problems, we can come up with very interesting and creative solutions. We just need to think about them, try, reflect, reignite, maybe reunite with our values or different kind of approaches. So there is no silver barrel here, and we should make this problem as very interesting to be resolved.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure to be here. I'm always happy to talk about the challenges and responses in my industry. And yeah, hope it was good.
Oh, it was amazing. And thank you, everyone who are joining us live or going to watch us later in the record. So feel free to add and follow Sass on LinkedIn, to follow her events and maybe join some of her programs, because she's really one of the best experts in this area. And she's very persistent in making this so many years in a row, which is not so easy industry to push in. So thanks, everyone. Thank you, Sass, for spending this afternoon with us.
It was a pleasure. Be well. Bye bye.